Subscribe to Echo Tales for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. It all started with a knock and a heartbeat she didn't expect. Mira had grown used to silence. At 34, her days were calm, almost too calm. She worked in a quiet bookstore, lived alone in a cozy apartment, and spent her evenings curled up by the window, listening to the rain or reading love stories she no longer believed in. Life hadn't been unkind, but it hadn't been exciting either. Her heart had settled into a slow rhythm, steady, quiet, and untouched for years. That afternoon, the sky was gray and heavy, and the rain came down in sheets. Mira sat by the window with a cup of warm tea, watching water roll down the glass. She felt the stillness around her like a blanket. Nothing ever changed. Nothing ever surprised her anymore. Then came a knock at the door. She opened it to find Arman, the 23-year-old son of her next-door neighbor, standing in the rain holding a stack of packages. He was soaking wet but smiling. "Thought I'd save these from drowning," he joked, handing her the damp parcels. Mira blinked in surprise. She hadn't seen him in ages. The last she remembered, he was a quiet teenager who barely spoke and spent his evenings playing soft piano tunes through the wall. But this was not a boy. He was taller now. His face had lost its roundness. There was something in his eyes, something older, quieter, more serious. "Come in before you catch a cold," she said, the words coming out before she could stop them. He stepped inside. She made him tea. They sat in her living room as the rain tapped gently on the windows. What started as a short thank you visit turned into a 2-hour conversation. They spoke about books, music, and the dreams they'd quietly tucked away. Arman was no longer the shy boy she remembered. He was confident, in a soft, thoughtful way. His voice was deeper, and when he looked at her, it wasn't like a neighbor's son looking at a woman twice his age. It was something else, something curious and steady, something that made her nervous. As he talked, she noticed things. The way his eyes lingered a moment too long, how he leaned in just slightly when she spoke, how he remembered small details from years ago, like the name of her favorite author, or how she liked her tea. Mira tried to brush it off, tried to remind herself of the years between them. But inside, a part of her stirred, a part that had been sleeping. The rain didn't stop, and neither did the conversation. Time slipped by without her noticing. At some point, their knees brushed under the table, a small, accidental touch. But neither moved away. It was a second, maybe less. But her heart beat louder because of it. When he finally left, Mira stood at the door for a long time, her hand still holding the doorknob. She could still feel the warmth of his presence in the room. The rain continued to fall, but the silence inside her had changed. She didn't know what it meant, or if it meant anything at all. All she knew was that her neighbor's son, once a quiet, awkward boy, had sat beside her that day, and what she felt next was completely unbelievable. After that rainy afternoon, something shifted. Arman started coming over more often. At first it was casual. He'd bring her a package or his mother's leftover soup, or ask to borrow a book. But it became clear that he didn't really need a reason. And Mira, though she never said it out loud, didn't mind. She found herself waiting for his knock. Her quiet evenings were suddenly filled with the sound of his voice, his laughter, and something else she couldn't quite name. Each visit felt more natural, yet strangely exciting. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing, old movies, favorite music, childhood memories. Armin wasn't like most people his age. He listened with care, asked deep questions, and looked at Mira like she mattered. It wasn't just polite interest. There was something more, something deeper in his eyes that unsettled her in the best way. He had a way of sitting close, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Mira noticed his presence more than she wanted to admit. The way he leaned, and when she laughed, how his fingers drummed softly on the table, how he smiled at her when she got passionate about a book. Her heart reacted before her mind could stop it. She kept reminding herself of the age gap, of how the world would see it, of how his mother, their neighbor, would never approve. But even as she told herself to stay cautious, her walls began to soften. One evening, as he sipped tea on her couch, he asked a question that made her stomach tighten. Do you ever regret not doing something, just because it didn't feel appropriate? Mira looked at him. His tone was gentle, but his eyes were steady, waiting. She didn't know how to answer. There were many things in her life she hadn't done. Love was one of them. Real love. The kind that stirred your soul, not just your schedule. But could she admit that to him? She said nothing. That silence hung in the room like smoke. Not awkward, just thick with unspoken feelings. Later, as he stood to leave, their hands brushed at the door. It was a light touch, the kind that could be dismissed as accidental, but neither of them moved. The air shifted. For a brief second, time paused. Then he left. Mira stood at the door long after he was gone. Her hand tingled where it had touched his. Her thoughts were spinning. Was this something? Was he feeling what she was too? Or was she imagining it because she was lonely? The next morning, she avoided the window. She didn't want to look over at his house. She didn't trust what she might feel or want. But deep inside, something had already begun. A quiet ache, a dangerous hope. Armin wasn't just a boy anymore. He was a man who saw her, who listened, who made her feel alive again. And Mira, against her better judgment, was starting to feel something she thought she'd buried years ago. Attraction, longing, and a fear that the line between right and wrong was getting thinner with every visit. The days after that quiet hand touch were filled with confusion. Mira found herself watching the door, listening for footsteps, waiting for another visit. But Armin didn't come. Not right away. And just when she thought maybe he had moved on, or, worse, regretted everything, there was a knock at the door. But it wasn't him. It was his mother. Mira opened the door with a polite smile, hiding the sudden wave of nerves. Armin's mother, always cheerful on the outside, stood with a strange look in her eyes, part friendly, part watchful. She held a dish of homemade food, said it was too much for their family, and Mira accepted it with a thank you. But it was clear she hadn't come just to share leftovers. So, Armin said he's been spending time here, she said casually, as if mentioning the weather. Mira kept her tone light. Yes, he's been helping me out. He's sweet. The woman's smile faded just a little. He is. He's always had a big heart, but he's still figuring things out, you know. Young people get confused. They think they know what they want. Mira froze inside. The meaning behind those words was clear. This wasn't just a neighborly chat. It was a quiet warning, a reminder of the gap between Mira and Armin, not just in age, but in what the world expected of them. After his mother left, Mira sat alone in her quiet living room, holding the warm dish in her lap, feeling colder than ever. She thought of Armin, of the way he looked at her, how he listened, how being near him made her feel young again, alive again. But his mother was right in a way. Mira was older. She had responsibilities, a reputation to keep, a life that had long stopped welcoming surprises like this. That night, the rain returned, soft but steady. She stood by the window again, watching it fall, wondering if she had let herself get carried away. Maybe she had mistaken kindness for something more. Maybe she had just been lonely. But before her thoughts could spiral deeper, there was a knock. Her heart jumped. She opened the door, and there he was, Armin, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes searched hers, serious and full of something she couldn't describe. "I need to talk to you," he said, voice low. She stepped aside, letting him in without a word. He stood in the middle of the room, looking like he had been holding something inside for too long. Mira's heart pounded. She didn't know what he was about to say, but her whole body already knew it would change everything. He looked at her with so much intensity it made her chest tighten. "No more pretending," he said. Those words hung in the air like thunder. Mira took a shaky breath. This wasn't a small moment anymore. It was something big, heavy, real, and part of her wanted to run. But the other part, the part that had been silent for too long, was already leaning in, already listening, already hoping. Because even though everything about this felt impossible, her heart wasn't saying no, not anymore. The moment Armand stepped into Mira's home that night, the air changed. Something about his eyes, his voice, the way he stood, it was clear he had made a decision. Mira felt it before he even spoke. Her heart was racing, her palms cold. She didn't know what she was about to hear, but she knew it would be important. "I know I shouldn't say this," Armin began, standing in the middle of the room. "But I can't keep pretending." Mira didn't breathe. Her hands trembled slightly, but she hid them behind her back. "I've liked you for a long time," he continued. "I don't know exactly when it started. Maybe the first time you gave me a book I didn't understand, and you took the time to explain it. Maybe the time I heard you crying at night, and I wanted to knock on your door, but didn't have the courage. Or maybe it was the way you always looked at me like I mattered." Mira felt like the world was spinning. Her heart was full, heavy, confused. This was not what she expected, even if a small part of her had dreamed about it in quiet moments. She had never let herself truly believe he felt the same. She looked away, searching for the right words, the responsible words. "Armin," she said softly, "you're young. You still have so much life ahead of you. What you're feeling, it's real, I don't doubt it. But you'll move on. You'll find someone closer to your world, someone your own age. I can't be that person." He didn't step back. He didn't look hurt. He just looked calm, like he already knew she'd say that. "Why do you think love cares about years?" he asked. "I know what I feel when I'm around you. I don't look at you and see age. I see someone who understands me, someone who makes me feel grounded, alive." She blinked back sudden tears. His words hit her deep, cracking through the wall she had built around her heart. "I've been alone for so long," she whispered, voice shaking. "I stopped hoping for things like this." "Then maybe it's time to hope again," he said quietly. But Mira, even as her heart pulled her toward him, took a step back. She couldn't make this decision in the middle of an emotional storm. She couldn't say yes to something that would change both their lives without thinking clearly. "I need time," she finally said. Her voice was steady now, but her eyes were full of emotion. Armand nodded. He didn't push her. He didn't beg or plead. He just gave her one long look, full of feeling, full of patience, and then walked toward the door. She watched him leave. When the door closed behind him, the silence came back. But it wasn't like before. It wasn't peaceful. It was loud with thoughts, full of what-ifs and memories of his voice, his words, his eyes. She stood in the middle of the room, not knowing what to do, but knowing something had shifted. This wasn't just a crush. It wasn't just a moment. It was something real. And now the choice was hers. The days after Armand's confession were painfully quiet. He didn't come by anymore. No knocks at the door, no messages, no shared tea or soft piano music through the walls. It was like he had disappeared from her world completely. And Mira, though she had asked for time, felt the emptiness like a heavy blanket, she kept busy. She cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, rearranged bookshelves, watered her plants twice a day. But no matter how much she tried to distract herself, her thoughts always went back to him. To the way he looked at her when he said, "I've liked you for a long time." She could still feel the warmth of his words. She could still hear the question in his eyes. "Why do you think love cares about years?" But reality was cold. She was older. He was just starting his life. And then there was his mother. The sharp look in her eyes still haunted Mira. What would people say? What would she say? Still, the silence was louder than the fear. She found herself walking past his house more than once. Sometimes she'd catch a glimpse of him through the window, sitting alone or playing the piano. But she never knocked, and he never looked up. Then, one afternoon, Mira returned home to find something under her door. It was a folded piece of paper, a letter. Her hands shook as she picked it up and unfolded it. It was from Armand. "You once told me life quiets down when we stop expecting anything new. But what if the new thing is exactly what we need to wake up? I'm not asking you to break rules. I'm not asking you to throw away logic or pretend the world will understand. I'm only asking you one thing. Do you still feel something when I sit beside you? If you do, meet me tonight. The old piano room. 7 p.m. Mira read the letter again. And again. Her heart was racing. Her hands were sweating. Her eyes burned with tears. She sat down on the couch, letter pressed against her chest. It felt like her whole world had come to a quiet stop. This was the moment. She had asked for time, and now time was asking for her answer. She looked at the clock. 5:48 p.m. Her mind spun with doubt. What if it was a mistake? What if this ruined everything? What if she let herself fall and it didn't last? But beneath all the fear was something stronger. Hope. A quiet, aching kind of hope that whispered, "Go." At 6:30, she stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair with trembling hands. Her heart felt like a drum in her chest. Every step she took toward the old piano room felt heavier, but also lighter, like she was walking toward something she had been missing all along. When she reached the door, it was just past 7. Wow. She hesitated, took a breath, and opened it. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew this. Whatever it was, it had already changed her. The door creaked softly as Mira stepped into the old piano room. Her heart pounded so loud she could hear it. The room was quiet, except for the soft sound of fingers brushing the keys. Armin was there, sitting at the piano, waiting. He looked up the moment she entered, his eyes wide, like he hadn't been sure she would come. Neither of them spoke at first. The air was heavy with emotion, tension, and something neither of them had ever said, out loud but both had felt for a long time. "You came," he said quietly. Mira nodded. She was still catching her breath, still trying to believe she was actually there, standing in front of him, choosing to be in that moment. "I read your letter," she whispered, "and I couldn't stop thinking about it." Armand stood slowly, like he didn't want to startle her. "So? Do you feel it? Still?" Mira looked at him for a long time. The boy she once saw as just a neighbor's son was gone. Standing in front of her was a man, honest, open, and full of feeling. Her throat tightened. It was hard to speak, but she forced the words out. "I do," she said. "I feel it every time you look at me." He stepped closer, but not too close. He was giving her space, still waiting, still holding back even though his eyes were full of longing. She smiled gently through the tears. "I tried to fight it. I told myself it was wrong, that it would fade. But it didn't. It grew." Armin took her hand slowly. His touch was warm, steady, familiar. "Then don't fight it anymore." For the first time in years, Mira let herself lean in, not just physically, but emotionally. She let herself believe in something beautiful, even if it didn't make sense to the world. She let herself feel loved. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. The way their hands fit, the way their eyes locked, it was enough. It said everything. A deep connection that went beyond words, beyond age, beyond logic. But love, even when real, isn't simple. The next morning, everything felt different. Brighter, but also more complicated. They had crossed a line. There was no going back. Mira woke up early and sat by the window, coffee in hand, heart full of questions. She was happy, yes, but also scared. What would the neighbors say? What would his mother do if she found out? Then came a knock. It was Armin again. This time, he didn't bring books or excuses. He brought resolve. "I'm going to tell her," he said calmly. "Not because we have to explain ourselves, but because I won't let fear make our choices anymore." Mira stared at him, surprised. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I'd rather face the storm with you. than hide in peace without you." Later that afternoon, Armin told his mother everything. Mira stayed inside, nervous, waiting. Hours passed. No one came to the door. No angry words. Just silence. Then, as evening fell, there was another knock. This time, it was Armin's mother. She looked tired, her face serious. Mira opened the door, ready for judgment. But what she got was something different. "I don't understand this," the woman said, "but I know my son. And he's never looked this sure about anything." Mira didn't speak. She just nodded. It wasn't full approval. But it was something. A beginning. And for the first time in a long time, Mira didn't feel like she was holding her breath anymore. She felt seen, held, loved. And that, after everything, was the most unbelievable part of all